first. So the idea behind Suka Society is that we look at all the issues behind what children are facing, in particular children who are marginalized, children who are lacking access to justice, children who are lacking the opportunities. And what we do is that we are trying to advocate for their protection and their preservation. Okay, so Suka Society will focus on two different areas. The first area is on the issue of justice. The second is on empowerment. So for the area of justice, we look into three different areas. The first area is look into the issue of human trafficking. Human trafficking meaning to say that there are people who've been trafficked into our country for either, unfortunately, forced into prostitution or sometimes into forced labor. What we do is that we look into the women and children population and see how we can create an environment where the survivors of such, of trafficking are protected. So we would, one of the main things we do is that we go into traffic protection shelters run by the government to conduct programs for victims. What we find is that a lot of victims, when they are rescued and kept in the protection shelters, there is not enough rehabilitative activities for them. So we will go in to do these activities. But the idea behind doing these activities is that we also want to train the officers, advocate with the government that in all the processes and activities the government and everyone else is doing for traffic survivors should be survivor-centric. So as such, we're looking into just their well-being to ensure that while they are in the protection shelter, they are cared for and their well-being is looked after. And the process of them attaining justice will be, will be done fairly on their behalf, and they will be returned home safely. The second issue of what we work on specifically for children in terms of justice would be the issue of children who are in prison, especially young offenders. For young offenders, we will go to the prisons and we run a restorative program for them. So we will spend 4 days in prison, doing about 10 to 15 rounds of this program in all the juvenile prison facilities throughout the country. There we work on, we spend time specifically on the young offenders themselves, and we talk about the importance of them owning towards the responsibility of what they've done. We talked about them developing support systems. We talked about them dealing with their own anger, their hurts and disappointments and so on. The idea behind that is that we want young offenders, when they are released from prison, not released angry, which unfortunately happens a lot of times. We're hoping that when they are released wanting to make a change for the better for themselves. The third area of what we focus on is on children who are caught in detention centers, specifically immigration detention centers. Here we're trying to advocate with the government to start thinking through in terms of what is good for a child. Are detention centers really suitable for a child to be placed in? And therefore we're trying to advocate with the government to start thinking about, should there be alternatives? Meaning to say that if you have to, number one, maybe preferably not to detain children, but if detention of children were to happen, then there should be alternatives where it is safe, where it is suited for a child to be in. So that's what we're trying to advocate for with the government. So in the process of advocating for the government, therefore we will conduct training programs for officers. we would, like for example, yesterday we would have a roundtable discussion with some of the senior officers talking about the specific topic on alternatives. So there are kids who are in detention centers, and when we go to detention centers, we see a mixed bag of people. There are stateless people in detention centers, there are refugees in detention centers, there are migrant, general mixed migration people who are also in detention centers and so on. So what we are looking at is that we're looking at this population and asking ourselves, if there are children there, how would they fit in such an environment where it's overcrowded, it's lacking resources and so on. So that's why the alternative to detention, as in asking the government to rethink through in terms of where to place children who have immigration issues, where to place them. We're going to try to get the government to think through to place them in places where it's more, it's safer for kids. The other spectrum of what we do, apart from justice, would be on empowerment. Empowerment meaning to say that we want people to be able to help themselves. Here we target the issue of orang asli, specifically on education. Meaning to say that we want to empower the orang aslis themselves to be able to provide education for kids. The dropout rate of orang asli kids who are from school is as high as 45%, meaning 45% of kids from standard 6 do not make it past standard 6. Most of these kids would end up being in the village and things like this, and not get into the mainstream of development and education. So what we are trying to do is that we're trying to get orang aslis themselves to want to start preschools to teach the kids. Why preschool? Because what we found is that one of the reasons why the dropout rate is so high is that many kids, when they enter standard 1, they will already know how to read and write. But for the orang asli kids, they enter standard 1 hoping to learn how to read and write because they've never been to preschool. As such, they are left behind from the start, and they will never catch up, and therefore they will drop out at, unfortunately, standard 6. So what we're trying to do, because some of these villages and so on is located really at the interior, we're trying to get the orang aslis themselves, especially those who are older, who are able to teach, to start their own preschool. So what we are doing as an empowerment for them is that we're going to provide training, we'll provide the necessary funding for them to run the preschool, and to provide whatever material resource, teaching aid and so on for them, so that they're able to run the school and educate the children who are in their own villages and so on.
Saya berasal dari Perak. Saya adalah orang asal di Malaysia, iaitu di mana orang panggil orang asli. Saya terdiri daripada suku kaum Semai dan saya adalah seorang guru. Matlamat saya menjadi seorang guru khususnya adalah untuk membantu kanak-kanak kami orang asli yang tercicir dari segi pelajaran disebabkan oleh ketidakmampuan ibu bapa mereka untuk menghantar ke sekolah. Oleh disebabkan ini, saya mengambil keputusan untuk tinggal di kampung saya dan memberi pendidikan yang setimpal menurut keadaan kemajuan dan pembangunan negara kita. Sekian, terima kasih.
We definitely welcome anyone who wants to get involved in what we do. However, I do understand that some of the areas of our work is not easy for people, especially volunteers, to come in. Like for example, it's not easy for a person to go into prison and run a program with kids who are in prison. However, in the area of work, especially among orang asli kids, what we are doing is that we are, as mentioned earlier, we're starting preschools for children who are in isolated villages. So the few schools which we are thinking of helping the orang asli start will be in Greek, Kopeng, Slim River and Gulmusang. Now these are not places nearby, but the idea is that it's supposed to be creating access to education for people who are not able to attain preschool education. So that's why it's a lot more further than your usual Klang Valley locations as well. So therefore what we're trying to do is that we're trying to get, in terms of what volunteers and so on can happen is that if you're able to go with us to some of these villages, we definitely welcome that, to help us see, visit and encourage the kids who are in the preschool. However, that's not easy for everybody to do so. So what we encourage other people to do is that to show support through our social media means. At this moment, we're trying to develop a fundraising program specifically to fund the teachers to teach. Right? So the idea is that we're trying to, it costs about 800 ringgit per teacher per month to run their preschool, to help 25 to 30 kids in the Orang Asli village. So we're trying to get people that if you're interested to fundraise for the project, what you can do is that you can log on to our Simply Giving website. And what you can do is that you can just start a fundraising page, do a fun activity, raise as many rounds of 800. One of the main reasons why we want to ensure that there is enough funding is that we want the Orang Asli kids to be able to benefit over an extended period. Education is not something that is a hit and run, or you do it once and then this got that. Education is something that requires time. And so therefore, what we're trying to push is that we're trying to make sure that the school is able to last at least 5 years. And so therefore getting the funding in for 5 years so that the teachers are able to teach continuously from the time they start, in which we're hoping to start in the 1st of January next year, as long as possible. And therefore kids are able to benefit from this program, and they are, there is a generation of Orang Asli kids who are able to be ready for primary school, and therefore being able to be on par with the other kids in their own primary schools as well. So that hopefully in the long run, we hope to see a reduction in terms of the Orang Asli dropout rate in our country.